It began without mercy. Not slowly. Not politely. One moment the air felt heavy and strange, the next it turned violent. Heat surged upward, pressure collapsed, and the sky darkened as if the sun itself had been erased. What followed was not just weather. It was an attack from the atmosphere itself. Winds exploded across southern China with terrifying speed, screaming through streets, slamming into buildings, tearing at anything in their path. Entire cities froze in disbelief as the invisible force grew stronger by the second. 60 miles per hour. 80. 100. Then far beyond what concrete, steel, and glass were ever meant to endure. In a matter of hours, wind speeds climbed to nearly 170 miles per hour, transforming ordinary streets into war zones and turning daily life into chaos. The storm didn't arrive. It struck. In Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Jianjing, the sound came first, a deep, unnatural roar echoing between buildings, louder than traffic, louder than sirens, louder than fear. Windows began to tremble. Walls vibrated. Rooftops rattled violently before lifting away entirely. Sheets of metal were ripped loose and hurled through the air like blades. Construction cranes swayed, twisted, and collapsed. Trees that had stood for centuries snapped and fell as if they were made of paper. The wind didn't push forward. It ripped sideways, upward, and downward all at once, leaving no direction safe. Cars were no longer grounded to the road. They slid across intersections, slammed into storefronts, some flipping over as if weightless. Motorcycles were tossed down streets. Traffic lights bent and tore free from their poles. Entire shop fronts exploded outward as pressure shattered glass in a fraction of a second. Skyscrapers, symbols of modern strength, betrayed their own height as windows burst and thousands of glass shards rained down onto the streets below, turning busy avenues into rivers of shattered crystal and blood. Power failed almost instantly. Transformers blew apart with flashes of blue light. Power lines crashed to the ground, sparking through floodwater. Neighborhoods vanished into darkness while the storm continued to scream overhead. Inside high-rise apartments, doors were ripped from hinges, furniture slid across floors, and people were thrown to the ground simply trying to move. Families ran for stairwells and bathrooms, clutching children, dragging the elderly, praying the walls would hold. Sirens wailed, but they were swallowed whole by the sound of the wind. The storm was louder than fear itself. Eyewitnesses later struggled to explain what it felt like. Many said the wind felt alive. Not random. Not chaotic. As if it chose targets. As if it hunted. Metal signs were torn from buildings and launched down streets at deadly speeds. Rooftops peeled back layer by layer. Entire sections of buildings collapsed under pressure. People trying to escape were knocked off their feet. Some were struck by debris without ever seeing it coming. Others were trapped as exits vanished beneath rubble. Hospitals filled rapidly. Emergency rooms overflowed with injured residents. Broken bones, deep lacerations, head injuries, crushed limbs. Medical staff worked without pause as power flickered and backup generators struggled to keep life-saving equipment running. Dozens were injured across multiple cities. And as communication networks failed and roads became impassable, the numbers kept climbing. At least 6 lives were confirmed lost directly to the storm, crushed beneath collapsing structures or struck by airborne debris. Dozens more were initially reported missing, feared swept away or trapped beyond reach. Then came the rain. As the winds continued their assault, the sky opened completely. Torrential rain poured down in relentless sheets, overwhelming drainage systems within minutes. Streets flooded. Sewers erupted. Water surged through underground spaces, filling basements, metro stations, and parking garages at terrifying speed. In low-lying districts, floodwaters rose from ankle height to waist height to chest height before people could react. Cars floated freely, crashing into buildings and each other. Buses were abandoned mid-route. Entire neighborhoods disappeared beneath muddy, debris-filled water. Families climbed onto rooftops, waving desperately for help as currents pulled at the structures beneath them. Others were trapped inside homes and shops, watching water rise inch by inch with nowhere left to go. For many, there was no warning. No evacuation. No second chance. Just minutes, sometimes seconds, to survive. Emergency authorities moved into full crisis mode. Evacuation orders echoed through streets when communication allowed. Police, firefighters, and rescue teams fought against raging winds and rising water to reach those trapped. Boats pushed through flooded avenues where roads once existed. Helicopters hovered overhead when conditions allowed, lowering rescue lines to stranded residents clinging to rooftops. Temporary shelters were opened in schools, stadiums, and community centers, filling rapidly with displaced families carrying nothing but shock and fear. Entire transportation networks collapsed. Highways vanished underwater. Rail lines shut down. Airports closed. Supply chains were severed. Factories stopped. Businesses were destroyed. The economic damage surged into the tens of millions of dollars, with losses expected to climb far higher. Farmland was submerged. Livelihoods washed away. Communities faced not just destruction, but uncertainty stretching far into the future. And even as the winds finally weakened, the danger refused to end. The storm's remnants continued to dump rain across the region. Rivers swelled beyond their banks. Saturated soil gave way, triggering landslides that buried roads and isolated villages. Flood warnings remained in effect as exhausted residents stared at the sky, knowing the threat was not over. This was not a movie. This was not exaggeration. This was real life for millions of people. Southern China stood battered, flooded, and shaken by one of the most violent storms in decades. Recovery would take months. For some, years. And for others, life would never return to what it was before the wind screamed through their streets. If this footage shook you, you're not alone. If it made you imagine what you would do if your city faced this kind of destruction, that fear is real. Because storms like this are becoming stronger, faster, and more unpredictable. Staying informed isn't optional anymore, it's survival. Stay alert. Stay prepared. And never underestimate the power of nature when it decides to strike.